Hello students, today we are going to do chapter number 7 from the textbook Beehive. The name of the chapter is Packing. Packing is an extract taken from Jerome K. Jerome's Three Men in a Boat. Let's see what is there in this chapter. It is supposed to be a very comical extract which should make us to laugh. But before you read, tell us whether you like going on trips. What kind of trips do you enjoy the most? How do you feel about having to pack for a trip? Have you ever discovered on a trip that you have forgotten to pack a few things you very much needed, or that you can't find them easily? Does this make you angry, or does it make you laugh at yourself? Now read this description of how the author and his friends pack. I said I'd pack. Now who's the I here? Again, this passage or this extract is taken from Jerome K. Jerome's Three Men in a Boat. So the I here is Jerome, the author. It's in the first person, it's in the direct speech. So the I is the narrator, Jerome. I said I'd pack. I rather pride myself on my packing. Packing is one of those many things that I feel I know more about than any other person living. It surprises me myself sometimes how many such things there are. I impressed the fact upon George and Harris and told them that they had better leave the whole matter entirely to me. They fell into the suggestion with a readiness that had something uncanny about it. George spread himself over the easy chair and Harris cocked his legs on the table. Cocked his legs means he put his leg on the table and crossed it. Now, when Jerome said that leave the packing to him, what he actually meant that he would give the directions of how to pack, and the packing was to be done by Harris and George. But here Harris and George take it in the practical sense and they sit down easily on a chair and a table and make Jerome do all the packing. This was hardly what I intended. What I had meant, of course, was that I should boss the job and that Harris and George should potter about under my directions. I, pushing them aside every now and then with, "Oh, you, here, let me do it." There you are, simple enough, really teaching them, as you might say. Their taking it in the way they did irritate me. There's nothing does irritate me more than seeing other people sitting about doing nothing when I am working. I lived with a man once who used to make me mad that way. He would loll on the sofa. Loll means sit in a very unpleasant way, sloppy way. He would loll on the sofa and watch me doing things by the hour together. He said it did him real good to look on at me, messing about. Now, I'm not like that. I can sit still and see other men slaving and working. I want to get up and superintend and walk around with my hands in my pockets and tell him what to do. It is my energetic nature. I can't help it. So again, the author, he makes it clear that what he actually intended was that George and Harris should be doing all the work of packing, and Jerome would be just instructing them like a supervisor or a superintendent. But here they are sitting down and Jerome has to do all the work. He recollects an incident when he used to live with a person, a man who used to very lazily sit on the sofa or on the bed and see Jerome doing all the work. He says he is not like that. He doesn't want to do the job, but at the same time, he will not loll about, he will not slop and sit idly. In fact, he'll be very active and instruct people in doing things. So, however, I did not say anything, but started the packing. It seemed a longer job than I had thought it was going to be, but I got the bag finished at last and sat on it and strapped it. Now, why do you think he's sitting on the bag to strap it? Of course, he must have not done it in a very pleasant way. The bag may be bulging and the buckles may not be meeting the hole. So, therefore, while strapping it, he has to sit on the bag, put some pressure on it, put his weight on it, and try to pull the straps to buckle. "Ain't you going to put the boots in?" said Harris. And I looked around and found I had forgotten them. That's just like Harris. He couldn't have said a word until I'd got the bag shut and strapped, of course. And George laughed. One of those irritating, senseless laughs of his. They do make me so wild. So when finally Jerome was able to strap the buckles together and zip the bag close, it was then that Harris said that Jerome had forgotten to pack the boots. And George broke out into a laughter, which irritated Jerome. I opened the bag and packed the boots in. And then, just as I was going to close it, a horrible idea occurred to me. Had I packed my toothbrush? I don't know how it is, but I never do know whether I have packed my toothbrush. My toothbrush is a thing that haunts me when I'm traveling and makes my life a misery. I dream that I haven't packed it and wake up in a cold perspiration and get out of bed and hunt for it, and in the morning I pack it before I have used it and I have to unpack again to get it, and it's always the last thing I turn out of the bag, and then I repack and forget and have to rush upstairs for it, and at the last moment and carry it in the railway station wrapped up in the pocket handkerchief. So a small thing like a toothbrush. When Jerome started this narration, he said he is rather proud of himself on his skills of packing, and now he says that whenever he packs, he always forgets his toothbrush, or he will pack his toothbrush before he actually uses it, and when he uses it, he again forgets to repack it. And the time when he searches for his toothbrush, it is the last thing that he finds while unpacking his suitcase. So he has to do double and triple the job that he usually does. And finally, when he does not pack his toothbrush, he has to wrap it in a handkerchief and rush to it along with his bag to the railway station. Of course, I had to turn every mortal thing out now, and of course, I could not find it. Now, what is he searching for? Presently searching for his toothbrush, whether he has really packed it or no. And after opening the bag and taking out each and everything from the suitcase on the traveling bag, he does not find his toothbrush. Of course, I had to turn every mortal thing out now, and of course, I could not find it. I rummaged the things up into much the same state that they must have been before the world was created. And when chaos reigned, of course I found George and Harris 18 times over, but I couldn't find my own. I put the things back one by one and held everything up and shook it. Then I found it inside a boot. I repacked once more. So while he removed each and everything from his traveling kit, from his traveling bag, he could not find his own toothbrush, but he could find George and Harris's time and again. And finally, when he began to shake things, he found his toothbrush in one of his boots. And then, poor fellow had to repack all over again. When I had finished, George asked if the soap was in. I said I didn't care a hang whether the soap was in or whether it wasn't. And I slammed the bag shut and strapped it, and found that I had packed my spectacles in it and had to reopen it. Now George was again up to his usual mischief. When finally Jerome had packed everything again, he asked Jerome whether Jerome had packed the soap or no. At which Jerome irritatedly answered that he does not bother, he does not care whether he has packed the soap or not. But then he finds out that his spectacles are missing, which he has to use it right now. He had packed his spectacles into the traveling kit. So he had to reopen and start all over again. It got shut up finally at 10:05 p.m. And then there remained the hampers to do. Harris said that we should be wanting to start in less than 12 hours time, and thought that he and George had better do the rest. And I agreed and sat down, and they had a go. Now, after Jerome had repacked the bag again, suddenly they remind him that they had the hampers to do. At this time, Harris, he said that it is less than 12 hours left for their traveling, and it is better that George and Harris do the rest. And Jerome very willingly agreed that they should do the packing now. They began in a high-hearted spirit, evidently intending to show me how to do it. I made no comment. I only waited, with the exception for George. With the exception of George, Harris is the worst packer in the world. So now Jerome wants to have some fun. He did not say anything. He was only waiting for George and Harris to do some sort of mistake. He said, except for George, Harris is the worst packer in the world. Harris is the worst packer in the world. And I looked at the piles of plates and cups and kettles and bottles and jars and pies and stoves and cakes and tomatoes, etc., and felt that the thing would soon become exciting. So looking at the things that are scattered all about regarding the hampers. What are the hampers? They carry in a basket. Hampers are carried in a basket, like they would be using it for daily use, something edible. So he said now something exciting is going to happen. It did. They started with breaking a cup. That was the first thing they did. They did that just to show you what they could do and to get you interested. So Jerome was right. He was waiting for something to happen, and something did happen very quickly, and that something was they broke a cup. Then Harris packed the strawberry jam on top of a tomato and squashed it. And they had to pick out the tomato with a teaspoon. Why? Otherwise it would rot and make a lot of smell. And then it was George's turn, and he trod on the butter. I didn't say anything, but I came over and sat on the edge of the table and watched them. It irritated them more than anything. I could have said, I felt that it made them nervous and excited. And they stepped on things and put things behind them and then couldn't find them when they wanted them. And they packed the pies at the bottom and put heavy things on top and smashed the pies in. So whenever we pack things, we generally feel that we should pack things which are heavier at the bottom and things which can easily be squashed or can get destroyed on the top. But here they were doing just the opposite. They upset salt over everything, and as for the butter, I never saw two men do more with 1 and 2 pence worth of butter in my whole life than they did. After George had got it off his slippers, they tried to put it into the kettle. It wouldn't go in, and what was in wouldn't come out. They did scrape it out at last and put it down on a chair, and Harris sat on it, and it stuck to him, and they went looking for it all over the room. I'll take my oath I put it down on the chair, said George, staring at the empty seat. I saw you do it myself, not a minute ago, said Harris. Then they started round and round again looking for it, and then they met again in the center and stared at one another. Most extraordinary thing I have ever heard of, said George. So mysterious, said Harris. Then George got round at the back of Harris and saw it. Why, here it is, all the time, he exclaimed indignantly. Where? Cried Harris, spinning around. Stand still, can't you? Roared George, flying at him. And they got it off and packed it in the teapot. Montmorency, the dog's name is Montmorency, was in it all, of course. Montmorency's ambition in life is to get in the way and to be sworn at. If he can swim in anywhere very particularly is not wanted, and be a perfect nuisance and make people mad and have things thrown at his head, then he feels his day has not been wasted. To get somebody to stumble over him and curse him steadily for an hour is his highest aim and object. And when he has succeeded in accomplishing this, his conceit becomes quite unbearable. He came and sat down on things just when they were wanted to be packed, and he labored under the fixed belief that whatever Harris and George reached out their hand for anything, it was his cold damp nose that they wanted. He put his leg into the jam and he worried the teaspoon, and he pretended that the lemons were rats and got into the hamper and killed 3 of them before Harris could land him with a frying pan. Harris said, I encouraged him. I didn't encourage him. A dog like that doesn't want any encouragement. It's the natural original sin that is born in him that makes him do things like that. The packing was done at 12:50, and Harris sat on the big hamper and said he hoped nothing would be found broken. Sitting on a big hamper and expecting it not to be broken. George said that if anything was broken, it was broken, which reflection seemed to be to comfort him. He also said he was ready for bed. We are all ready for bed. Harris was to sleep with us that night, and we went upstairs. We tossed for beds, and Harris had to sleep with me, he said. Do you prefer inside or outside, Jay? I said, I generally prefer to sleep inside a bed. Harris said, it was odd. J stands for Jerome. Do you prefer the inside or the outside, J? I said I generally preferred to sleep inside a bed. Harris said it was odd. George said, "What time shall I wake you fellows?" Harris said 7. I said no, 6, because I wanted to write some letters. Harris and I had a bit of a row over it, but at last split the difference and said 6:30. "Wake us at 6:30, George," we said. George made no answer, and we found on going over that he had been asleep for some time. So we placed the bath where he could stumble on getting out of them in the morning, and went to bed ourselves. So it was all a very funny incident where Jerome, Harris, and George, these are the three young men, they have decided to go on a trip. They take a boat, they are rafting into the sea, and they are doing some packing. Now Jerome feels that he is the best packer in the world, and so he suggests to Harris and George that leave the packing to him. What he actually meant by leaving the packing to him is not actually that he wants to do the packing, but he wants to just supervise, he wants to dictate to them what is to be done. But George and Harris, they perhaps know Jerome very well, and they wanted to have some fun. So they went and sat down sloppily, and they made Jerome do all the hard work. While Jerome was trying to pack things, he finally managed to pack his bag, and while he was trying to buckle the bag and zip it, at that time Harris told him that he forgot to pack the boots. So he had to undo the packing again, and then when he packed, then suddenly he remembered whether or not he had packed his toothbrush, because that was the thing he always forgot whenever he did his packing. And so he unpacked his bag again, and when he unpacked his bag again, he tried to find out, and he could not find his toothbrush. He could find Harris's toothbrush, he could find George's toothbrush. In fact, he found these toothbrushes more than 3 times, but he could not find his own toothbrush. Finally, when he had to dust out everything, he found his toothbrush in the boot, and then again he had to do his packing. So finally, when he finished his packing, it was already 10:30. Now the turn came of Harris and George to do the packing of the hampers. What are the hampers? The hampers are the articles which is needed every day, or that can be packed into a basket. So they began to pack, and they were the worst packers, as Jerome said. And then they start with a funny way, breaking a teacup, and then there's an incident with the butter and jam and such ordinary things. And then they have a dog by the name of Montgomery, and Montgomery is again always coming in between. So all such funny incidents keep on happening, and finally when they very sloppily finish their packing, they tend to go to bed. And since there was bed meant for only 2 people, so they had to toss for it, who's going to sleep in the bed and who's going to sleep out of the bed, and what time the alarm should be set. And finally, when the alarm is to be set, both of them have an argument. One wants it at 7 o'clock and the other wants it at 6 o'clock. And finally, when they agree at 6:30, they find the companion fast asleep. So in this way, we finish this chapter. I hope that the chapter is clear to you all. I'll try to search if we have any good videos about it, and I'll try to post it on the group.